Sisters, let me take you straight to the gut wrench that hit me like a freight train barreling down a foggy Decatur back road on Christmas Eve. The kind of blow that turns your holiday heart from warm cider to ice in a blink. Me, Ellie Hayes, 62 and still mourning my Robert 2 years gone, setting the table with Mama's lace-trimmed linens that she'd hemmed by hand under that yellow kitchen lamp, the air thick with the sizzle of honey-glazed ham in the oven, collards bubbling low with turkey necks for that deep soul flavor, and cornbread rising fluffy as a fresh snowfall. The room glowed soft from the candles I'd lit on the mantel, cast in flickers over our family portrait from last Easter, me and Robert front and center. His arm slung round my waist like it always was, Marcus and Kendra flanking us with those grandbabies, Jamal Jr. and Tia tugging at our hems, all of us smiling like we had forever ahead. Laughter was supposed to bubble up easy as the eggnog I poured into Mama's crystal bowls. Marcus sharing his latest win at the insurance office, Kendra spilling tea on her kindergartner's holiday crafts, and Tiffany, Lord have mercy on her calculated soul, playing the doting daughter-in-law, passing the roles with a family first always, right? But when she rose, flute hoisted high like she was bout to drop wisdom from on high, that glint in her eye shifting from sparkle to stiletto sharp, and let loose with, to Ellie, our timeless matriarch, holding it down with all that classic charm. Cheers to bring in some fresh energy to the family tree for the younger set. The room sucked in a breath so deep it could have pulled the ornaments off the tree, her words landing like a slap across my lined cheek, humiliating me right there in front of my own kin with a smirk that hollered I was a faded snapshot. Too old-fashioned for their filtered fast-lane lives. Forks froze midair over the ham I'd slaved over since dawn. Kendra's eyes bugging out like she'd bit into a lemon. Marcus choking on his sip of punch. The babies clapping their sippy cups in innocent rhythm. But me? I sat stock still, pulse pounding like a drumline at a homecoming game. That smile I'd rehearsed in the mirror all morning locked tight as I raised my glass slow and sure, clinking hers with a ting that rang like a reckoning bell, and said smooth as Mama's peach cobbler, to fresh energy, sugar, may it add sparkle without scratching the silver. The table tittered uneasy, Robert's brow furrowing faint like he'd caught a whiff of something burning, Tiffany's flute faltering a fraction as her perfect pout twitched, but inside, y'all, a wildfire roared low and lethal, 'cause what unfolded right then, at that spread, the riposte I rolled out that had her stumbling, over her tongue and him gaping like a guppy out of water, shocked 'em both senseless and set my spirit to soaring. Higher than any star top in that tree. Grip the arms of your chair, 'cause Auntie Lorraine's rewinding to the garden where this gall first grew, wading through the weeds of wrong and the whips of will, and landing in the glory of my grand reversal, 'cause when your own throws dirt to dull your diamond, a matriarch's dazzle, that's the divine that dazzles 'em dumb. To truly taste the tart of that toast, you gotta savor the sweet that came before. So let me dish you the full plate of how Robert and me whipped up this world, from cornbread crumbs and cast-iron conviction. I was Ellie Washington in my fiery 20s, 22 and full throttle, flying out a Spelman with a business degree dog-eared from all-night cramming sessions in the dorm, ducking the West End auntie's side-eyes of, honey, better bag a beau before that diploma gathers dust, while I clerked at the Realty Roost on Ponce de Leon, balancing bids in heels that hurt worse than a heartbreak hangover, dreaming of my own agency with a sign saying Hayes Homes, where dreams find doors. Robert rammed into my lane at that block bash off Cascade Avenue, Howard Hotfoot with an engineering etch, fresh as farm cream and motor oil on his knuckles from his uncle's under-the-hood hustle, flippin' francs with a grin that could grease a seized engine. Sweet pea, you shine like you could tally treasures and tame tigers in the same breath, he bantered, beaming me aboard brimmin' with slaw and spare ribs slick with his hush-hush sauce, and zing, chemistry crackled crispier than the crust on fried green tomatoes. Our courtin' was copper budget bliss, spins up I-85 with the top tossed back, him hashin' his Howard Hayes, losing his patter young to the pint, how he apprenticed under cousin Zeke to tune Tin Lizzies and tune his own tempo true. We'd veer off at the Vista Point, his arm round my shoulders anchored and ardent, swapping schemes over flat fantas. Ellie, I ain't affluent, but I got audacity and an armory of affection, crave to carve a castle with me from these calloused claws. Half-year hastened like a summer shower, and he genuflected in that self-same spot under the sycamores. Baublebeam humble but heartfelt, weld your world to mine. Baby, let's loom a legacy from these laborers' limbs. Nuptials were nectar. Not nonsense. Pledges at Greater Piney Grove with mama's pearls round my neck and lace from the loner huggin' my hips. Him in a rented tux that fit fate like a glove. Revel at the rec hall with hoe cakes and hooch flowin' free. Whirlin' to ain't no mountain. High enough till the Luna lagged low. We lunged, linked from the get-go starter spot in East Lake with conduits croonin'. Complaints and partitions paper thin as a politician's promise. Me manifestin' memos while midsection mountain with Marcus. Robert reelin' extra hours at the engine bay to bankroll the bassinet and that birch cradle from his Graham's attic. Marcus materialized 87 at Northside, a plump parcel with Robert's dimples and my dart quick wit, and oh. We invested infinite playground prances at the paddlin' pool where he'd paddle like a porpoise in paradise. Graces at my tias with her ambrosia salad augmentin' the assembly line. Me mitigat his molars with menthol rubs while Robert rode the red-eye shift, croonin' low. Our crown jewel? Ellie, refine him regal for the road ahead. Kendra chased 2 years posterior, all coils and conundrums that could confound a Congress. Morphin' our walk-up to a walk-in haven, that Decatur ranch we snared on supplication and a supervisor's stipend. Escrow scraped from my vault to vendor Vanguard and his service sentinel surge. The counts climbed like kudzu, hawked my heirloom locket for Marcus's mandolin maestro. Bartered beauty bouts for Kendra's karate garb. Hawked Robert's hickory hooks for herd holidays to the highlands where the young'uns hunted huckleberries and we hunted hushed moments in the hollows. Booster bash is where I'd bake the banana puddin' that cleared the coffers, ballet bends with bouquets in hand. Branchin' to branch campuses, I bulwarked every, baleful or blessed. Robert's rugged paw my pylon in the press of parents. His post-pastime purr, we weanin' winners. Love, you the winner that wired it all. 38 laps round the sun, and we lapped lavish in our lane. Brood branched bold. Marcus moored to Tiffany 5 years fled. A glossy graphic guru from his guild with a gleam like glazed guile and a gaze that gauged every gain like a gavel. Hunkered in a buckhead bastion, huntin' helm of her high-rise hustle while she hobnobbed high tea with her influencer ilk. Kendra, my kindle and keeper of the flame, 36 and kindlin' young minds at a Montessori in Mechanicsville. Plighted to Jamal the Java jockey from the youth vespers. Burrowin' in a bungalow by the beltline with bassinet blueprints blueprinted on the fridge door. Robert and me, cadence caramel smooth. Me moonlightin' as a mentor for fledglin' firms from the breakfast nook. Him pension plump from the pit stop. Paddin' the pledge and Friday flounder at the fish fry on McAfee Road. Woo-re-wooed with whimsy. Tuesday tango at the Township Hall. Glidin' graceful to At Last in the garage with the door half up for breeze. His thumb tracin' my crow's feet with a breathy, Ellie, you're riper than the vines in Virginia wine country. Annam just aged you, ambrosia. Pledge polish in 18 pinned it permanent. Lakeside liturgy with the lineage and loves. Loops swapped under the sycamores where he'd queried the question. The kids cheerin' like we'd just won the lottery. We pegged us for seamless sailin' into taut tendon and twilight toasts on the terrace. Sippin' sunsets with the little ones on our laps. But Faltlands forked furtive and fine. Robert's Howard hymns spillin' slacker over scotch at family barbecues. An attic arc overlooked with sepia snapshots of him and Denise arm in arm at a homecomin' hoopla. Tiffany's tangential, Ronnie. You must have been quite the Casanova back then, huh? Over deviled eggs at Labor Day lunch, her halt on his hoot hangin' a half-beat too heavy, like she was hookin' a memory. I filed it away in the water under the bridge folder. Our ligature was lead, no laceration likely. Yet that Noel vigil, as the first freak flurry flecked the forsythia frail and fair like powdered sugar on a beignet, the chasm chiseled clean as a whistle. Banquet braced for a half-dozen. The issue, Jamal, the wee ones, Serena and her man for that extra patter of conversation to keep things lively. The board buckled under the bounty, Porcus Corona Mel Dijon drippin' sticky. Macaroni aurum crusty with sharp cheddar and breadcrumbs. Viridis faba amygdala snappin' with bacon and pearl onions. Oxycoccos acre verax zingy with orange zest and a whisper of clove. Rotulus calidus, straight from the fornax with butter melting in the cracks. Tarta expecto with spuma noobs piled high as hope. Kendra and me had been in the cullina whirl since dawn, her secare the nooses for the crust while I suffio the bird, radio croonin' Hoc Natale Lenis in the background like a lullaby for the season. Robert poked his caput in, ligament laxus around his neck, viscum ramus tucked in his sinum for a serious surprise later. Domine, olens paradiso in here. Ellie superas the elves this year. He planted a tempora osculo, diuturnus and calidus, then evanescit to check the arbor one last time. Tunk. Guter purgo from the Ianua ab. Casual quasi caelum specto. Cara. Caput sursum. Invitavi Denise for prandio. Ex me ab Howard. Visitat familia. Sola rursus. Putavi bonum capere. Sabe. Sepeli securis proferia. The culter mergi tacitum. Torquir tardum. Denise umbra ab Ius Howard dies. Ille qui juravi historia antiqua when we conveni at that 85 Picnic Ecclesia Inn. Locus camera, collared blur, culter kendra pausa medio sicare. Denise? Echo, vox stabilis adamans, sed interior ruina quasi shortbread. Ex tua, Natale Robert? Shrug, grin pudibundus. Veni Ellie, aqua sub ponte, familia nunc quodammodo. No magnum. No magnum? Me sapono pro nos, pullustranse pro mixto soboles nostra, nunc scaena pro eius encore, cum ille qui paene surripio mea aeternal ante inicium. Cor maleo catauba rapida, sed cul ludere, mater doce me gratia subignis, smile tenui, domus tua quoque mel. Mesa magna, interior? Ira bullio bassus, realization aurora quasi somnium malum noe vigilo a, post triginta octo annum, vota renovata, tempestas tolerata, cogito capere cum illa apto in mea natale? In fundo sider stabilis, sed quasi vinum plura pro servo, telefonum sinum from apron, digiti volantis, nuntius ad serena. SOS, Robert invitavit ex sua prandio, Denise, Natale, quid in mundo? Replicatio eius ping celer, puella, limes, loquer or trauma to a glow up. Semim plantatus, sorores, dolor solum, sed fortitudo flor. Parum scivit, quasi tintinabulum primus ospes, et Denise calcaneus clic, via up at sex acutus. Prox move mea I am fervent, festum mirum dulcius quam placenta, et acutius quam stanum. The dinner dragged on like a root canal with no novocaine. Sisters, Denise holding court with her Howard war stories. Her hand brushing Robert's sleeve a whisker too often. Her laugh pealing high and hollow as she reminisced about that time we ditched class for the mall in D.C., while I doled out pie slices with a hostess grin so stiff it could crack walnuts. The kids shifting in their seats like they were sitting on pins. Robert ate it up, leaning forward with that sparkle in his eye I thought was reserved for our private moments. Chiming in with, "You were a handful back then." Denise, still are. His chuckle rolling deep like thunder, making my chest tighten like a too small girdle after Thanksgiving. Kendra kept shooting me those, "You all right?" glances over her cranberry sauce, her foot tapping mine under the tablecloth in a secret Morse code of support, while Marcus cleared his throat for the umpteenth time, trying to pivot to talk of the Hawks' season like it was a safe harbor in Hurricane Harbor. The grandbabies blessed their innocent hearts, banged their plastic spoons on their high chairs, turning the tension into a chaotic symphony. But the atmosphere was thicker than the fog off the river after a downpour, the holly wreaths on the walls seeming to wilt under the weight of unspoken words, the twinkling tree in the corner mocking me with its perfect poise while my world wobbled. Tiffany, always the one to stir the pot when it was already boiling, jumped in with her, "Denise, you're giving me goosebumps." Ellie, "You ever storm the streets like that, or was it all bake sales and bulletin boards?" Her tone dripping with that fake sweet condescension. Her eyes challenging me to admit I was the home guard heroine, the one who'd sidestepped the spotlight. The shame swelled then. A swell turning to a swell, crushing my ribs till respiration rasped ragged. The space swirling with their chortles while I perched pinned, the matriarch mutilated to the joke. my red wrap dress from the Belk sale suddenly feeling like a clown costume in their circus. But I didn't fold, y'all. No, sir, not one bit. Mama drilled poise in the pinch into me from the cradle, so I kept the facade flawless, topped her glass with another pour of punch, Denise. It's my twist, cranberry with a hint of bourbon for that holiday kick, watching her sip and simper. Her quaint but with a bite, adorable landin' like a backhanded pat on the head. The type she'd been doling out since she strutted into our lives at Marcus's engagement party 5 years ago. Tiffany'd always had that thorn under her nail. Sisters, keen as a straight pin in a puffy sleeve, from the minute she glided through our backyard bash in a curve-clinging sheath, cooing, "Ellie, your setup is so authentic." Her gaze grazing the hand-stitched quilts on the tables like they were garage sale rejects she'd step over. She'd been the gradual gall ever since. Harmless jabs at my vintage vibe during Easter brunches. Pushing, I upgrade the menu with her quinoa bowls over my smothered pork chops, or muttering to Marcus within earshot, "Babe, Mama's decor is sweet, but those curtains? So retro." I'd gulped it for goodwill, for my son's sake, telling myself it was just clash, city gloss on country grit. But that night, with Denise fanning the flames and Tiffany feeding the fire, the gulp gagged, scorching up from my gut like bad bourbon gone bitter. Kendra caught my signal across the spread, her toe tapping mine under the linen, a hushed, "We got your back." "Mama," and Jamal leaped in with a yarn about his latest bug hunt in code to redirect the ray. Bless that brother. The young'uns carted dishes to the sink, tots toddled to the den for Rudolph reruns, leaving me, Robert, Denise, and Tiffany in the eatin' room with JoJoin and Unease edging in like a thief in the night. Robert reclined, loosening his tie with that roguish yank, and said, "Denise, regale Ellie with the DC Dispatch, the rally, remember? You were leading the line like a lioness." My knife nicked the china a notch too near, but I kept cool, stirring sugar into my mug measured as measuring a deed. "Do share." Sounds like a story for the ages. Denise beamed, launching into her 68 epic, fists flying air and voices vibrating the reflecting pool, casting herself the spearhead of the surge while Robert sopped it up, nodding, "You were a whirlwind, girl, untamed, like it was last lunch." Tiffany tacked on, "Sis, you're giving me goosebumps. Ellie, you ever storm the streets like that? Or was it all bake sales and bulletin boards?" Her lilt laced with lemon drop, eyes egging me to own I was the home guard heroine, the one who'd sidestepped the spotlight. The shame swelled then. A swell turning to a swell, crushing my ribs till respiration rasped ragged. The space swirling with their chortles while I perched pinned, the matriarch mutilated to the joke. My red wrap from the Belk blowout suddenly a target in their takedown. But as Denise dug into the pie, her "This is darling, Ellie," like a church social from the good old days, the ire inverted to ingot. No whale, no whirlwind, poise my parry, polish my payback. "Darlin's got depth, Denise," I replied, ladling her a slab substantial as my spine. "Kinda like old yarns, entertainin' for a spell, but family flavors? That's the feast that fills the hollow." The board went board stiff, Robert's brow buckling bold. Tiffany's tines teeterin' tense, but I beamed beatific, elevating my cup. "To flavors, may the vintage without vintage. Bait bit. Y'all, now the haul." The hush after my comeback toast stretched like taffy pulled too thin. Sisters, awkward and aching, the kind of quiet that buzzes in your ears louder than a hive of honeybees, with Tiffany's flute frozen halfway to her lips, her eyes narrowing like she'd been served a slice of her own medicine and it stuck in her craw, and Robert shifting in his seat, his napkin crumpling in his fist as he tried to chuckle it off with a "Ellie always has the last word. Pass the pie. Love, let's keep the peace." But I saw it in his face, that flicker of unease mixing with a dash of defensiveness, like he'd caught the scent of scorched earth from the fire I'd just kindled under their feet. Denise, ever the smooth operator, recovered with a quick sip and a nibble, chewing deliberate as she mulled her next line, her "This pie has history, like the stories, full of heart," landing another one of those veiled volleys that made my molars grind under my hostess hat. The kids in the kitchen clanged pots louder than a one-man band. Kendra peeking round the doorframe with a "y'all need more water or anything?" that carried the weight of "what's brewing in there?" While Marcus mumbled an excuse about the grandbabies needin' their jammies and vanished to the den, leaving me solo with the trio and the tension tapping its foot like an impatient uncle at a wedding. Tiffany set her glass down with a clink that cut the quiet like a knife through butter. Her manicured nails tapping the stem like she was Morse coding her comeback, and said, "Ellie's got a point. Family's all about those layers. But sometimes you gotta peel back the past to let the future bloom, right, Ronnie?" She leaned into him a smidge, her shoulder nudging his, and Robert nodded a tad too quick. "Yeah, balance is key. Old and new, like that old Temptations tune." Balance. The word wedged in my throat like a chicken bone, implying I was the old weighing down their new, the layer to be lifted so their bloom could burst forth, while she and her energy took the garden. But I wasn't yielding, y'all, not 1 inch. I'd learned from Mama, who raised 4 girls on a cleaning lady's wage after Daddy dusted out the door, that you don't lash out in the heat. You simmer, you strategize. You strike when the iron's hot and the room's ripe. So I reclined in my chair, folding my arms over my red wrap, the one I'd chosen deliberate for the evening, thinking it'd make me feel festive and formidable, and said, "Peeling back layers is fine for onions, Tiffany, but for family? You risk cutting the core that keeps us whole. Some roots run deep for a reason. They anchor the tree when the gales howl. Like us, Hayes, 38 years of hurricanes, and we're still rooted strong." The space snapped taut again, Denise's fork faltering mid-lift. Her eyes darting to Robert like she was waiting for him to lob a lifeline. But he just sipped his joe, looking a little adrift between the two shores. Tiffany's smile spasmed, that flawless foundation cracking at the corners. And she fired back, "Oh, Ellie, you're a poet. Roots are vital for sure. But trees need branches to reach the light, don't they? To grow, not just grip the ground." Grip. The term gouged, suggesting I was clingy, the grounded grandma dragging them down from their reaching aspirations, while she and her new energy stretched for the sun. My blood surged, but I kept it caged, taking a leisurely sip of my nog, letting the nutmeg nip sweet on my tongue before I rejoined. "Branches make pretty pictures, sugar, but without those roots, the first big blow snaps them clean off. I've seen it. Families that prune too hasty, thinking old is obsolete, end up with barren limbs and no shade. But us, Hayes, we nurture the roots, 'cause they give us the grit to grow grand." Robert cleared his throat, trying to play referee. "Ellie's spot on. Family's about harmony, y'all. Old and new like that old soul jam." But Tiffany wasn't folding, her laugh forced and falsetto. "Harmony is everything, Ronnie. Speaking of Ellie, that pie crust. It's charming, but have you tried the air fry version with the almond flour base? So much lighter for contemporary holidays. Contemporary." The jab jarred, dressing it up as tip, but stripping me to the quaint cook who couldn't keep pace with their light ways. Right there with my man soaking it in and my daughter darting daggers from the door. The wee one's bedtime balls from the den drifted in like a divine diversion. Jamal Jr.'s "Nana, read 'Twas the Night," pulling me up to refill the story hour, but as I poured milk into sippy cups, Tiffany sidled up, her voice caring as a cat with claws. "Ellie, that was sweet. Your little roots tale, really touching. But honestly, the kids could use some modern flair. Marcus and I were thinking maybe a family photo shoot next year, with a pro stylist, to keep things unified. The term twisted like a thorn in my side, implying I was the frayed fringe frumpling their flawless frame, the outdated outlier needing a makeover to mesh with their curated clan. My hand quivered on the carton, milk sloshing near the lip, but I kept my timbre even. "Unified's lovely, Tiffany, long as it don't unravel the seam. Some stitches are structural, hold the whole quilt together." She blinked, beam blurring. "Oh, sure. Tradition's key. Just evolving it a tad. Evolving." The word wormed in, recalling all the evolution I'd endured. Her nudges for me to try yoga after Robert's passing. Claiming it keeps widows resilient, her snickers at my cozy cardigans during game nights, the way she'd streamline my linen closet during visits, ditching my monogrammed towels for her monogrammed essentials. I'd choked it for Concord. For Marcus's calm, he was my firstborn flame, the boy I'd labored 30 hours for, hollered for at every harmonica recital and history harvest flop, the one who'd etched "Mama's my mainstay" on a card after Robert's revascularization in 16. "You're my pole star, Ma," he'd say, clasping my hand in the ER anteroom. And I'd anchored to that like an anchor in an anchorage, telling myself Tiffany's insights were just her metropolitan mashing against my rural rhythm. But that toast? It wasn't mash. It was malice, a public pat-down that pronounced me the timeless trinket needin' a tune-up, right there with my girl gapin' and my boy biting his lip. Kendra collared me in the corridor after the wrappin' paper flew, shreds crunchin' underfoot like crushed dreams, her arm hookin' mine adamant. "Mama, that was vicious. New energy. She's calling you stale, like your ways ain't worthy for the younger crew. Want me to pop off?" I pressed her palm, timbre tranquil so the din wouldn't detect. "No, sugar, let her bask in her bitty victory. Mama's packing a full deck, and I'm dropping my joker when the jackpot's ripe. Robert'd preach patience in the pinch, and that's our play." She dipped her head, oculus overflow like Robert's when he'd rally the underpup at the shop. "Proud as punch, Mama. You're a bastion." He'd be beamin', bastion. The term swaddled me like Robert's worn work shirt. Recallin' the dusks he'd draw me near after a grind, breathe in my ear, "Ellie, you're my bulwark, tougher than any beam I ever bolted." And as the abode hushed, company bundlin' 'gainst the freak flurry, Robert escortin' Denise to her lease lux with his palm on her elbow a tad too tender. Her "we gotta grab coffee," proper ketchup trailin' like a lure in the lagoon. I felt the bastion bolster, parapet high but passion higher. Tiffany air-pecked my cheek chill as chamomile. Her knight Ellie loved the roots riff. So folksy, landin' like a pat from a patron to a pauper. But I beamed benign. Folksy's got flavor. Honey keeps the feast full. As the portal clicked to, the resonance resounded like a rally cry. And with the offspring crashin' in the spare suites and the snow sprinklin' the panes like pixie dust turned prank, I slinked to the scullery for a nocturnal nog, mind millin' like a millstone, time for my follow-up feint. The one that'd rebound their energy on 'em like a ricochet with razors. But as the timepiece told midnight and the domicile sighed to slumber, parum sibant, the aurora would usher a dinner denouement none foresaw. A stunner swathed in sagacity with a label, a matriarch with manifests. What I unleashed next? It kicked off with a casual yarn, but climaxed with a concussion that convulsed the clan canopy to its core. The fortnight foment in that feast had been a frenzy of fervor and faith. Y'all, me risin' with the wrens for a duo-decade straight. Docket longer than my limb. Brine the beast in saline and saccharum till it pleaded pity. Caramel the camotes with molasses and meringue for that gooey gospel. Cram the fowl with cornbread and salvia from the plot Robert plowed back in '94. And the Yule bough bedecked with baubles from our debut Noel,